All right, today we're going to dive into one of the most fundamental ideas in all of science. We're talking about the cell, the basic building block of every single living thing. So, to get us started, let me ask you a question. What's the one common thread, the secret ingredient that connects absolutely everything that's alive? Think about it. A giant redwood tree, a microscopic little germ, and even you. What do you all have in common? Well, the answer is the cell. It's the fundamental Lego brick of life. It is the smallest possible thing that can be considered alive, capable of doing all the things life needs to do. Bottom line, anything less than a complete cell, it's just not considered alive. But how on earth did we figure this out? For most of human history, this entire microscopic universe was completely invisible to us. This knowledge had to be built, piece by piece, by some really curious people who were using new technology to peek into a world no one had ever seen before. This whole story, it unfolds over centuries. It all kicked off back in the 1600s when a guy named Anton von Leeuwenhoek first laid eyes on a living cell with his microscope. But then, things got quiet for a while. It took almost 200 years before Robert Brown spotted the cell's nucleus. Then, the pace really started to pick up in the 1830s. Matthias Schleiden figured out all plants are made of cells, and right after Theodor Schwann realized, hey, so are all animals. But there was still this one giant piece of the puzzle missing, until 1855, thanks to a game-changing idea from Rudolf Virchow. He put it very elegantly in Latin, omnis cellula est cellula. Now, this might just look like a couple of fancy words, but this simple phrase completely revolutionized our understanding of where life comes from. What does it mean? Simply this. Every single cell comes from a cell that was already there. Cells don't just pop into existence out of thin air. They divide. Life continues from previous life. This was a huge deal. It was the final nail in the coffin for the old, weird idea of spontaneous generation. So, you take all these incredible discoveries from Schleiden, Schwann, and Virchow, you put them all together, and what do you get? You get one of the most important cornerstones in all of biology, the cell theory. And you know what? The modern cell theory is just beautifully simple. It really boils down to two main ideas. First, every living thing you can possibly think of is made of cells or stuff that cells make. And second, just like Virchow said, all new cells are born from other cells dividing. These are the fundamental rules for all life on our planet. Okay, so we've got the theory down. Now let's do the fun part. Let's zoom way in and actually take a look at the blueprint of life itself. What are the basic designs that cells come in? Well, it turns out nature basically works with two fundamental designs. First up, you have prokaryotic cells. Think bacteria. The name literally means before the nucleus. They're kind of simple, and their DNA just floats around inside. Then you've got the eukaryotic cells, which means true nucleus. These are the cells that make up plants, animals, you and me, and they keep all their genetic material, their DNA, tucked away neatly inside a nucleus. And these eukaryotic cells have another trick up their sleeve. They've got other little membrane-bound compartments inside them called organelles. You can literally think of them as little organs. Each one, like the mitochondria making energy or the lysosomes getting rid of waste, has a very specific job to do. It makes the cell work like a super organized, tiny little factory. But here's where it gets really cool. Not all cells look the same. Not by a long shot. In fact, they come in this staggering variety of shapes and sizes. And this diversity isn't random at all. As you're about to see, a cell's shape is perfectly designed for its job. Just take a look at this gallery of cells. I mean, we see everything from little discs to long branching structures to tall columns. This is a perfect illustration of a core principle in biology. Form follows function. The shape of a cell gives you a massive clue about what it actually does. Okay, let's zoom in on those red blood cells. They're described as round and biconcave. That's just a fancy way of saying they're shaped like a little disc that's kind of squished in on both sides. And that unique shape is what gives them the flexibility to squeeze through the absolute tiniest blood vessels in your body to deliver oxygen everywhere. Now look over at the nerve cell. Wow, it could not be more different, right? It's incredibly long and has all these branches shooting off. This structure is absolutely essential for what it does, sending electrical signals over huge distances, basically connecting your brain to your big toe in a flash. And just to give you an idea of how tiny we're talking, a typical human red blood cell is about 7 micrometers across. I mean, that is so small, you'd have to line up about 150 of them, side by side, just to span a single millimeter. It's incredible. But believe it or not, cells can get way, way smaller than that. At the absolute extreme end of the scale, we find the smallest cells known to exist, a type of bacteria called mycoplasmas. A mycoplasma cell is only about 0.3 micrometers in length. That is more than 20 times smaller than one of our own red blood cells. It just goes to show you the mind-boggling range of sizes that life can operate on. So let's quickly wrap this up and go over the key takeaways from our little tour of the cellular world. When it comes to size, the range is just immense, right? You have the tiniest mycoplasma at 0.3 micrometers, you've got a human red blood cell around 7 micrometers, all the way up to the largest single cell known, the egg of an ostrich, which you can literally hold in your hand. And the core principles, these are the big ideas you want to remember. The cell is the basic unit of life, period. All living things are made of them. All cells come from other cells. And crucially, a cell's shape is directly connected to its function. Form follows function. And that leaves us with one last thing to think about. If everything, from a tiny gnat to a giant blue whale, is built from the same basic blocks, what is it deep down inside those cells that tells them how to build such wildly different creatures? And what makes each and every one of us unique? Well, that's a great question for another time. Thanks for listening.